jungle.
Hello, I'm Julia Curry and you're watching the Australian News. I'm here to tell you a little bit of background on Australia and its history. Australia is the sixth largest country in the world, and it is also a continent that is completely surrounded by the Indian and Pacific Ocean. It has a population of over 24.8 million people. The capital of Australia is Canberra, and it is a coastal city. The country is known for its Sydney Opera House, the Outback, great steaks there by the way.
In the Outback, where there's wood, there's flavour. Wood Fire Grilled favourites, only at Outback. Introducing our new thick natural cut ribeye. Juicy and marbled, this steak is truly a cut above the rest. And be sure to try our seasoned, perfectly grilled salmon or tender pork porterhouse for just $14.99. Get in for Wood Fire Grilled favourites. Only at Outback Steakhouse.
Animals such as the kangaroo, koala, and platypus. It is also known for the Great Barrier Reef, which is the largest coral reef in the world, housing over 1,500 species of fish. The northern part of Australia typically has hot and humid summers and warm, dry winters, while the southern part of Australia has mild summers and cool, rainy winters.
Hi, I'm out here in the tropical climate of Australia, and it's rain.
Now, let's learn about the history of Australia. Take it away, Sam.
Thank you, Julia. Today we'll be talking about Australia's oldest people, the Aboriginal people, which are the oldest continuous culture on Earth. They were thought to have discovered Australia over 60,000 years ago. There were around 1 million Aboriginal people living across the country, living as hunters and gatherers. They were split into about 500 different clans, each having their own language, which was about 700 different languages. Despite being separated into many different clans, all Aboriginal people shared the same belief in the dreaming, or Tjurpa. This gave all people a deep connection between their ancestors and the spiritual connection with their land, but traveled widely to make trade and find water and seasonal produce, as well as ritual gatherings. Now, Taryn.
Continuing on, in 1770, Captain James Cook charted the East Seas and claiming this land, which was then known as New Holland, as Britain's new colony. But this settlement was originally used as a penal colony, which meant that convicts were sent there to live. So on the 26th of January, 1788, the first fleet of 11 ships, which carried 15,000 people, half of them convicts, arrived in Sydney Harbor. When penal transport ended in 1868, more than 16,000 men and women had come to Australia as convicts. But as Europeans began arriving to this land, the original population, the Aboriginal people, began dying of diseases. These diseases were brought over by the Europeans who were already immune to them. They transferred their diseases to the natives. These diseases included bronchitis, measles, scarlet fever, chickenpox, and even the common cold. But some diseases were also diseases such as smallpox, tuberculosis, and venereal disease like syphilis. And these ailments both affected Europeans and natives. Now back to Julia with information on the gold rush.
The gold rush began in 1851 when a man named Edward Hargreaves saw that there was a lot of gold in California, so he decided to see if he could find any gold in Australia. He ended up striking gold in New South Wales, and word quickly spread that gold was among them. A few months later, nearly half of the people living in Sydney moved to try to get their piece of the wealth. Due to the increase in wealth, prices of food and wealth rose while the population doubled. The first people to arrive were young men looking to make quick money, but it quickly changed to businessmen arriving. This changed the nature of Australian immigration. The government, the military, and the people of Australia were deeply alarmed after the fall of Singapore in February 1942 about the possibility of a Japanese invasion. Japan had the military capability, and Australia lacked defenses. Japan never actually planned an invasion, but the fear of one led Australia to form a close reliance of the United States to protect itself.
The formal name of Australia is the Commonwealth of Australia. Australia is both a representative democracy and a constitutional monarchy, with Queen Elizabeth II as Australia's head of state. Not only does she have corgis, but she will also have kangaroos too. Australian Parliament consists of the Queen, who is represented by Governor-General, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. The Parliament passes laws which affect the whole country. There are 3 arms of government in Australia. The first, the legislature, also known as Parliament, is responsible for debating and voting on new laws to be introduced under the power of Section 51. They are also in charge of the snacks during meetings. The executive, also called the Australian government, is responsible for enacting and upholding the laws established by the legislature. Certain members, also called ministers, are also members of the executive with special responsibilities for certain areas of the law. The judiciary is the legal branch of government. It is independent from the other 2 branches of the government and is responsible for enforcing the laws and deciding whether or not the other 2 branches are upholding their responsibilities, like bringing the snacks.
Now let me introduce a member of Australian Parliament, Julia.
Hi, I'm here today to explain more about how the government in Australia functions. Australia is a federation of 6 states which, together with 2 self-governing territories, have their own constitutions, parliaments, governments, and laws. 6 states are joined together to form the Commonwealth of Australia. They still each retain the power to make their own laws over matters not controlled by the Commonwealth under Section 51 of the Constitution. State governments also have their own constitutions, as well as a structure of legislature, executive, and judiciary, as stated before by Sam. Territories are areas in Australia that are not claimed by the 6 states. They are allowed to be distributed by Australian government or granted a right to self-govern. You get the right to self-govern! You get the right to self-govern! Now, let's talk about local government. Constitutional responsibility for local government lies within the state and territory governments. Consequently, the roles and responsibilities of local government differ from state to state. Local governments are also known as local councils.
We have recently obtained more information about the Great Emu War of 1932. Australia had declared war on the emus in 1932, yes, a very serious war. This war was also called the Great Emu War of Western Australia, where Australia's officials deployed armed soldiers to kill emus. An emu is a large, flightless, fast-running Australian bird resembling the ostrich. It has shaggy gray or brown plumage, bare blue skin on the head and neck, and 3-toed feet. This fight began during the Great Depression when emus were scattered across Australia and were eating farmers' crops in the inland areas. This problem grew bigger with over 20,000 emus migrating inland through the breeding season. The crops the farmers were growing were supposed to be fed to some of the population, and it would bring economic benefits. When the government was notified, they deployed ex-soldiers and active soldiers with machine guns to kill these birds. Guerrilla tactics were used as the commands were split into small groups to travel and kill them. Alas, the Australians could not manage this outbreak of emus, and the emus were victorious and beat the people of Australia.
Thank you, Erin. Today, Australia is one of Asia Pacific's most wealthiest nations, and it has grew to this in over 2 decades. The GDP is very high while the poverty is low, which makes it a strong economy. Australia has a free market, which is an economic system in which prices are determined by unrestricted competition between privately owned businesses. This means that getting people to buy a business item is a competition, so low prices are always guaranteed. This nation has one of the first 5 developed markets in the world, with the components being trade, manufacturing, services, and finances. But the economy is held together by the Australian Securities Exchange, also known as the ASX. This is our country's trading practices and is one of the major sources of money flow.
Yes, these components include trade, manufacturing, services, and finance, but several other factors are positively influencing Australia's economy. They are competitive in services, technologies, and high value-added manufactured goods. According to its Department of Industry, Innovation and Science, services, especially financial and insurance services, account for more than 60% of GDP. Mining and agriculture are an important sources of exports. The current investment in mining is about $130 million. Several resources that helps the economy include aluminum, alumina, and bauxite, coal, copper, diamonds, gas, gold, iron ore, nickel, oil, uranium, and zinc. Unlike much of the world, Australia's soil cannot sustain growing crops, but does supply the world with 1/3 of the wool exported throughout the world. Also adding in the grain and livestock trade, with wheat being the country's leading crop. The cattle population is vast in Australia because there is so much land that is utilized for grazing, making beef and cows a large part of the economic surplus. Wood from the forests are also sold for economic benefit, although not as widely. Overall, Australia's economy is very beneficial and has been for many years, so the future looks promising for the continuation of the positivity.
Ah, yes. Let me start my day off by eating Vegemite and feeding my pet kangaroo, Jack. I have to play my didgeridoo for an hour straight because it wards off the large spiders and snakes that live by my house.
Yes, let me go to the Sydney Opera House with my pet emu to watch Phantom of the Opera.
I need to go barbecue some shrimp and wrestle a crocodile before I surf in shark-infested waters. Crikey! Now, let's talk about the culture and wildlife of Australia. Australia is well known for animals like the dingo, koala, kangaroo, wombat, and more. These animals reside here because of the different ecosystems that Australia is made up of, so it can hold animals of all sorts of species. Also, I miss Steve Irwin. He knew so much about these beautiful creatures. Rest in peace, Steve Irwin. Anyway, Australia is also known for its widespread use of Vegemite, a spread made from leftover brewer's yeast extract with added vegetables and spices, commonly spread on toast. People say it's disgusting, but Australians are wild, so we can eat our yeast if we want. And another thing we are known for is the didgeridoo, which is a wind instrument developed about 1,500 years ago and is still very popular today. Let's close it up with Erin.
Australia is a really cool continent. It has a rich history involving clans, gold rushes, Japanese invasions, and even wars against emus. It also had to endure epidemics involving smallpox and measles. Its government is a representative democracy and a constitutional monarchy, and there are 3 arms of government. Australia as a nation will continue to grow because of its blossoming culture and economy. The GDP and imports add to the country's wealth of revenue and trade. As for the culture, it brings many tourists and happiness to the citizens who live there. The wildlife is vast and beautiful, which adds to the popularity. Overall, we suggest to visit this beautiful, prosperous place one day. Peace, love, rest in peace, Steve Irwin, our country's national treasure. Eat your heart out, Nick Cage.
In the arms
the